What if happiness was never the purpose of life? Not misunderstood, not misdefined, but fundamentally the wrong target. This single assumption, that life is meant to be happy, sits at the center of modern suffering. It is taught implicitly through culture, advertising, education, and even self-help philosophy. From a young age, people are trained to believe that a good life is one that feels good as often as possible. Pleasure becomes proof, comfort becomes success, discomfort becomes failure. And yet, despite unprecedented levels of convenience, entertainment, and material security, anxiety and depression have become structural features of modern society. This is not a coincidence. It is a contradiction. The problem is not that people are failing to achieve happiness. The problem is that happiness was never designed to be achieved. Modern psychology has a name for the mechanism that quietly sabotages the pursuit of happiness: hedonic adaptation. It describes the mind's tendency to return to a baseline level of satisfaction regardless of positive or negative changes. Get the promotion, buy the house, achieve recognition. The emotional spike rises briefly, then fades. Soon, the mind demands the next upgrade. This is not a personal flaw. It is how the nervous system works. Dopamine does not reward possession. It rewards pursuit. The brain is structured to motivate action, not to maintain contentment. As soon as a desire is fulfilled, the chemical incentive disappears, and a new desire takes its place. From an evolutionary perspective, this makes sense. A species that remains satisfied would stop surviving. But when this mechanism is misunderstood and turned into a life philosophy, it becomes destructive. People begin to chase emotional states that were never meant to last. And when those states fade, as they inevitably do, the conclusion is not, "This is how the mind works," but, "Something is wrong with me." This is why the pursuit of happiness so often leads not to fulfillment, but to quiet despair. Even those who reach the cultural definition of success eventually collide with this truth. This is why the most unsettling warnings about happiness come not from philosophers, but from people who achieved everything they were told to want. Jim Carrey once said that he wished everyone could become rich and famous so they could see that it is not the answer. Steve Jobs, at the end of his life, spoke not about achievements, but about relationships and presence. Michael Jackson, perhaps the most idolized figure of his time, lived surrounded by adoration and died surrounded by isolation. Leonardo da Vinci, revered as a genius, left behind notebooks filled not with satisfaction, but with unfinished questions and restless inquiry. These are not moral lessons. They are data points. They reveal a pattern that modern culture refuses to acknowledge. Achievement does not resolve the human condition. It only amplifies whatever relationship a person already has with their own mind. Psychology confirms what these lives imply. Studies consistently show that people who organize their lives around maximizing happiness are more vulnerable to anxiety and depression. When happiness becomes a goal, the present moment becomes a problem. There is always something missing, something unfinished, something not yet optimized. The mind begins to live in a state of chronic deficiency. This is where an ancient insight becomes unexpectedly relevant. Long before neuroscience, long before clinical psychology, the Buddha identified a mistake so subtle that humanity has been repeating it for thousands of years, confusing relief from discomfort with genuine well-being. To explain this, Buddhist teaching uses a metaphor that is deliberately uncomfortable in its simplicity: itching. Scratching an itch feels good, but only because something felt bad first. If there were no itch, scratching the skin would be painful. The pleasure is not positive in itself. It is the temporary reduction of irritation. Most modern pleasures work the same way. Eating feels good because hunger is uncomfortable. Entertainment feels good because boredom is unpleasant. Achievement feels good because inadequacy is painful. Validation feels good because insecurity hurts. What people call happiness is often just the absence of a previously created discomfort. This changes everything. It means that much of human behavior is not driven by the pursuit of joy, but by the avoidance of pain. The mind is not running toward happiness. It is running away from dissatisfaction. And the faster it runs, the more dissatisfied it becomes. This insight dismantles a core illusion of modern life. It reveals why the constant stimulation, consumption, and self-optimization never lead to peace. They temporarily soothe inattention, but they also reinforce the belief that something is wrong whenever discomfort arises. From this perspective, anxiety is not a malfunction. It is a signal. Depression is not a failure. It is exhaustion from endless striving. The Buddha did not frame life as a problem to be enjoyed. He framed it as a condition to be understood. His first observation, often misunderstood as pessimistic, is that life contains dukkha. The word is commonly translated as suffering, but this translation is incomplete. Dukkha refers to the fundamental unsatisfactoriness of conditioned existence. Even pleasure is unstable, even success decays, even love is vulnerable to loss. This is not a condemnation of life. It is a refusal to lie about it. The second observation is more radical. The cause of this unsatisfactoriness is tanha. Craving, not desire in the casual sense, but the demand that reality be different than it is. The insistence that experiences must be held, repeated, extended, or avoided. Craving is not limited to material things. People crave certainty, identity, validation, permanence. They crave being someone. They crave escaping what they are feeling. And because everything they crave is impermanent, the craving itself becomes endless. The third observation is where modern thought often stops listening. The unsatisfactoriness can end. Not by arranging life perfectly, but by ending the compulsive reaction to experience. This state is called nirvana, not a place, not a reward, but a nervous system no longer inflamed by constant wanting and resisting. And the fourth observation is the most practical of all. There is a path. Not belief, not worship, a method. The Eightfold Path is not religious doctrine. It is a psychological training program designed to dismantle the machinery of suffering from the inside. It begins with understanding, seeing impermanence clearly, recognizing cause and effect in the mind. It continues with intention, choosing non-harm, restraint, and clarity. It extends into speech and action, how one interacts with others and earns a living. And it culminates in mental discipline, effort, mindfulness, and concentration. Each element is a skill. Each one reduces friction between the mind and reality. What makes this teaching so uncomfortable for the modern world is that it does not promise happiness. It promises freedom from unnecessary suffering. And paradoxically, when suffering is no longer constantly resisted, something unexpected emerges, a quiet, durable sense of well-being that does not depend on stimulation. Not excitement. Not euphoria. But peace. This is why happiness behaves like a butterfly. Chase it, and it escapes. Stop chasing, and it may land on your shoulder. The mistake modern society makes is not wanting happiness. It is making happiness the objective instead of the byproduct. When life is organized around ethics, awareness, and understanding, happiness appears naturally, without being hunted. What makes this perspective so difficult to accept in the modern world is not that it is abstract, but that it is deeply practical. It challenges the default operating system of contemporary life. Modern society is built on the assumption that dissatisfaction is a problem to be solved through acquisition, stimulation, or optimization. Buddhism approaches dissatisfaction as a signal to be understood. This difference is subtle, but it changes everything. When discomfort appears, the modern response is immediate intervention. Scroll, consume, distract, improve, escape. Silence feels threatening. Stillness feels unproductive. The absence of stimulation is interpreted as emptiness, rather than space. The nervous system is kept in a state of constant engagement, and the mind mistakes this agitation for aliveness. But the mind cannot rest in motion. What the Buddha recognized, and what modern psychology is slowly rediscovering, is that suffering is sustained not by pain itself, but by resistance to pain. Physical discomfort may be unavoidable. Mental suffering is optional. It is created by the added layer of judgment, fear, and narrative that the mind places on top of raw experience. This is why two people can experience the same external conditions and live in entirely different psychological worlds. One feels oppressed, restless, incomplete. The other feels grounded, capable, and calm. The difference is not circumstance. It is relationship to experience. The Eightfold Path exists precisely to retrain that relationship. Right view, often misunderstood as belief, is simply accurate perception. It is the ability to see impermanence without panic, uncertainty without collapse, and cause and effect without superstition. When impermanence is understood intellectually but not emotionally, people still cling. When it is understood experientially, clinging weakens on its own. Right intention follows naturally. When the mind clearly sees that grasping creates pain, the desire to grasp softens. This is not moral discipline imposed from above. It is behavioral intelligence emerging from understanding. Non-harm, compassion, and renunciation stop feeling like sacrifices and begin to feel like relief. Right speech, action, and livelihood are often framed as ethics, but they function psychologically. Every lie fragments the mind. Every harmful action creates internal tension. Every livelihood that contradicts one's values generates background anxiety. Integrity is not virtue signaling. It is mental hygiene. When words align with reality, when actions align with values, the mind stops fighting itself. This internal coherence alone resolves a surprising amount of suffering. Right effort is not brute force. It is direction. It means noticing which mental states are being fed and which are being starved. Attention is nourishment. Whatever receives it grows. Whatever is ignored weakens. This applies as much to anxiety and resentment as it does to calm and clarity. Right mindfulness is the skill modern society simultaneously craves and resists. It is the capacity to remain with experience without immediately reacting. Not suppressing thought, not indulging it, simply seeing it. Neuroscience now confirms what contemplative traditions observed long ago. When thoughts are observed without identification, their grip loosens. Mindfulness creates a gap. In that gap, choice becomes possible. Right concentration stabilizes the mind further, not through force, but through gentle continuity. When attention can rest without fragmentation, the nervous system exits survival mode. The constant scanning for threats quiets. A baseline of ease becomes accessible, not because life is perfect, but because the mind is no longer at war with itself. None of this requires withdrawal from society. This is a common misunderstanding. Liberation is not escape, it is non-entanglement. The Buddha did not teach people to abandon life, but to stop being consumed by it. This distinction matters. A person can engage fully in work, relationships, and creativity without being psychologically enslaved by outcomes. Pleasure can be enjoyed without clinging. Pain can be endured without identity collapse. Success can be pursued without self-worth dependency. This is what freedom actually looks like. Modern psychology approaches similar territory from a different language. Cognitive behavioral therapy, acceptance and commitment therapy, and mindfulness-based stress reduction all point to the same mechanism. Suffering decreases when thoughts are seen as events, not truths. Emotions lose intensity when allowed rather than resisted. Meaning stabilizes when values guide behavior instead of transient moods. The convergence is not accidental. Both traditions are observing the same system from different angles. What differs is emphasis. Modern culture still asks, how can I feel better? The Buddha asked, why must I feel a certain way at all? This question cuts deeper. When happiness is no longer the objective, life reorganizes itself. Choices become quieter. Values replace impulses. Attention returns to the present. Not because it is blissful, but because it is real. The constant comparison to imagined futures weakens. People often fear that letting go of the pursuit of happiness will lead to apathy or emptiness. The opposite happens. When craving relaxes, appreciation sharpens, ordinary moments regain texture, conversations deepen, the nervous system recovers its natural rhythm. Joy becomes possible again, not as a demand, but as a response. This joy is not dramatic. It does not spike and crash. It does not require conditions to be just right. It is the relief of no longer fighting reality. The deepest shift occurs when responsibility replaces entitlement. When the mind stops demanding that life provide a certain emotional experience. It becomes capable of meeting life as it is. This is not resignation, it is maturity. Freedom, in this sense, is not getting what you want. It is no longer being ruled by what you want. This is why the Buddha framed the goal not as happiness, but as the end of suffering. Suffering is active, it requires effort, it is maintained through clinging, aversion, and confusion. When these processes are seen clearly, they unwind. What remains is not numbness, but simplicity. The modern world struggles with this idea because it threatens entire industries built on dissatisfaction. Advertising depends on perceived lack. Social media depends on comparison. Self-help often depends on perpetual improvement. A person who is internally content but not complacent is difficult to manipulate. Such a person is not passive. They act with clarity. They work without desperation. They love without possession. They engage without losing themselves. This is not a mystical promise. It is a psychological consequence. When the mind stops chasing happiness, it stops creating the conditions that block it. Seen this way, the question, what is the purpose of life, begins to dissolve rather than demand an answer. The question itself is born from a particular mental posture, the belief that life must deliver a specific emotional outcome in order to be meaningful. When this belief is examined closely, it becomes clear that it is not neutral. It is shaped by a culture that treats life as a project, the self as a product, and happiness as a measurable result. But life was never a project, and the mind was never designed to be satisfied permanently. The Buddha did not offer a purpose in the sense modern people expect. He did not say, this is what you should become. He said, in effect, this is what you can stop doing. Stop clinging, stop resisting, stop confusing impermanent states for stable ground. This is deeply unsettling to her. Seen this way, the question, what is the purpose of life, begins to dissolve rather than demand an answer. The question itself is born from a particular mental posture, the belief that life must deliver a specific emotional outcome in order to be meaningful. When this belief is examined closely, it becomes clear that it is not neutral. It is shaped by a culture that treats life as a project, the self as a product, and happiness as a measurable result. Purpose, under this framework, becomes something to be achieved, proven, and displayed. But life was never a project, and the mind was never designed to be satisfied permanently. The Buddha did not offer a purpose in the way modern thinking expects one. He did not present a mission statement or a grand destiny. Instead, he pointed to a process of unlearning, a gradual dismantling of the habits that generate suffering. In doing so, he shifted the question from, "What should my life be?" to, "What is making my life unnecessarily painful?" This shift is subtle, but it is radical. When purpose is framed as something to be found, people search endlessly. When it is framed as something that emerges once confusion is removed, searching stops. Attention turns inward, not in narcissism, but in investigation. The mind begins to observe its own patterns rather than obey them. This is why the Buddha's teaching begins with diagnosis, not inspiration. The Four Noble Truths are not commandments. They are observations. They describe how the mind behaves when it is ignorant of its own mechanisms, and how it behaves when that ignorance fades. The first truth does not say that life is miserable. It says that life, as experienced through clinging and resistance, is unsatisfactory. Even pleasure contains instability. Even success carries anxiety. Even love is shadowed by the fear of loss. This is not a cynical view. It is a precise one. The second truth identifies the engine, craving. The insistence that reality must conform to preference. The demand that experiences last, repeat, or disappear. Craving is not limited to desire for pleasure. It includes aversion to pain and confusion about impermanence. It includes the craving to be someone specific, to secure an identity that will not dissolve. The third truth is where the modern mind often disengages. Suffering can end, not through perfect circumstances, but through the cessation of compulsive reaction. When craving weakens, suffering loses its fuel. When resistance softens, pain no longer multiplies. The fourth truth provides the method. The Eightfold Path is not mystical. It is functional. It trains perception, intention, behavior, and attention in a way that aligns the mind with reality rather than fantasy. What is often missed is that this path does not require withdrawal from the world. It requires clarity within it. A person can work, build, create, love, and participate fully without being psychologically consumed by outcomes. The difference lies not in activity, but in attachment. Modern psychology increasingly echoes this insight. Research on well-being consistently shows that people who orient their lives around meaning, values, and contribution experience more stability than those who orient around pleasure maximization. Acceptance-based therapies demonstrate that allowing discomfort reduces suffering more effectively than avoiding it. Mindfulness practices reveal that observing thought weakens its authority. Different languages, same discovery. The mind suffers most when it believes that discomfort is a problem to be eliminated rather than a signal to be understood. It suffers when it treats happiness as a requirement rather than a byproduct. It suffers when it confuses stimulation with fulfillment and motion with direction. When these confusions are addressed, life does not become euphoric, it becomes manageable, and from manageability, a quieter form of well-being emerges. This is why the pursuit of happiness often fails. It places the mind in a permanent state of comparison between how things are and how they should feel. That comparison generates tension. That tension drives craving, and craving perpetuates dissatisfaction. Freedom arises not when happiness is secured, but when the demand for happiness loosens. This does not lead to apathy. It leads to engagement without desperation. When the mind is no longer bargaining with life for emotional guarantees, it becomes capable of genuine presence. Work is done because it is worth doing, not because it promises identity. Relationships are entered because they are meaningful, not because they fill a void. Pleasure is enjoyed without fear of its disappearance. The paradox is simple. When happiness is no longer chased, it becomes more available. This happiness is not the sharp peak of excitement. It is the steady ground of peace. It does not depend on constant stimulation or ideal conditions. It survives loss, change, and uncertainty because it is not built on denial of those realities. From this perspective, the purpose of life is not to feel good. It is to see clearly. Clarity reduces unnecessary suffering. Clarity aligns action with values. Clarity reveals which desires are worth following and which are merely noise. When clarity is present, decisions simplify, conflicts de-escalate, the nervous system relaxes. Life does not become easy. It becomes honest. And honesty is stabilizing. This is the quiet revolution at the heart of the Buddha's teaching and its convergence with modern psychology. It does not promise transcendence from the human condition. It offers freedom within it. Freedom from compulsive wanting. freedom from chronic resistance, freedom from the belief that life must deliver a certain feeling to be acceptable. In that freedom, something unexpected happens. Joy appears, not as a demand, but as a response. Meaning appears, not as a goal, but as a consequence. Peace appears, not as an achievement, but as a natural state once friction is removed. So the purpose of life is not happiness. Happiness is too fragile, too dependent, too temporary to carry that weight. The purpose of life is the ending of unnecessary suffering, through understanding, ethical living, and mindful awareness. When that purpose is honored, happiness arrives quietly, without being asked. Not as a reward, not as a destination, but as a byproduct of living in alignment with reality. And that, paradoxically, is enough.